Welcome to All Things Greater Burlington, where you will hear from the movers, shakers, and changemakers that are moving Greater Burlington forward. Here is your host, Stephen Brody.
Welcome to All Things Greater Burlington. I'm your host, Stephen Brody. The Greater Burlington Partnership has been a staple in the Greater Burlington area for several years, but perhaps some of you are unaware of exactly what the Greater Burlington Partnership is and what its function is in the area. Well, who better to discuss this with us than the President and CEO, Della Schmidt. Della, thank you so much and appreciate you being with us today.
My pleasure.
Well, before we get started, you have been here for a few years, but you came from out of state. You came from another area and another chamber of commerce, and you were quite successful there, having spent several years. What was it that got you interested about wanting to take on a new challenge and come to Burlington, Iowa?
Well, I wasn't exactly looking for a new opportunity, but when I was contacted by the recruiter that was doing the search on behalf of the Greater Burlington Partnership, he made a very compelling case for this partnership model, which Stephen was new to me. And so I entered into the conversation, and when things got to the point of a site visit, it was just very intriguing to me. The community as a whole, of course, is amazing, but actually the organization and the partnership model, which did not exist in my former state.
Mm-hmm. And for those that are not aware, the partnership model is something that is not typical in the chamber world, for example. So talk about for a moment what the Greater Burlington Partnership consists of.
Sure. And not just the chamber world. The partnership model extends beyond the Chamber of Commerce to all four of our entities.
Yep.
And in many communities, the entities that are here as a group are actually individual in other communities.
Right.
So here at the Greater Burlington Partnership, our four partners include the Chamber of Commerce, Convention and Visitors Bureau, Downtown Partners, which is the Main Street program, and Economic Development, which is often referred to as Grow Greater Burlington. Mm-hmm. In many communities, particularly outside of the state of Iowa, those four entities operate as standalone individual organizations, which creates, particularly in smaller communities, some challenges. Challenges that after almost 30 years in this industry, I became well acquainted with. So to elaborate, in many communities, the Chamber of Commerce and the Main Street program and economic development are entirely different, with their own boards and their own staff and their own addresses and their own phone numbers and their own websites, and they don't necessarily work together particularly well. And unfortunately, in some communities, they don't play nice with each other.
Sure, I can understand that.
Yeah, they compete for dates on the calendar. They compete for volunteer resources. They compete for financial resources. They compete for bragging rights or visibility in the community. And back to your earlier comment, that's why coming here was so intriguing to me and why I'm so excited after 2.5 years to have had this experience, because it just makes so much sense to be housed together, to work together, to be pulling in the same direction. It's very freeing in many ways, and it just changes the outcomes, in my opinion.
When you came on board and you were trying to get your feet wet, I'm sure you had a lot of great ideas and plans, and then lo and behold, COVID hits, right, in the spring of 2020. How did that affect you in your role as president? Because now this is something obviously was unforeseen and not planned. So what did you have to do to pivot to have to deal with this pandemic?
Well, I think in some ways, personally, I'm still pivoting, or I'm starting to pivot back. So I had been on staff and here in the Greater Burlington area for about 8 months when the pandemic hit. I was actually returning from a trip out to Arizona, where I had an opportunity to sit down and meet with Randy Weingard from Weingard Company. And it was upon that trip back that all the weird things started happening.
Yeah.
And within 24 hours of my airplane landing and arriving back here in Iowa, that the governor started shutting down. That's the phrase that we heard,
Sure.
we're shutting things down, and
Sure.
that was going on all over the place. So that's kind of my where were you when moment, right?
Yeah.
So those early months, for me professionally, I was just attempting to learn the community and learn the people. And after less than a year, I had still not made all of those rounds. So how the pandemic affected me personally and professionally was that onboarding came to an abrupt end, stop, a hard stop. All of a sudden, I'm trying to lead the organization from a spare bedroom in our home on Zoom meetings, and I hadn't even met everyone yet. So
all
that
the staff was sent home basically, and for the foreseeable future, you all were working from home?
Correct. We all went home. We were all working on Zoom. And so all board meetings went to a virtual format. All staff meetings went to a virtual format. There were, because that happened in March, by April, May, the weather was getting better. And I started scheduling walking, talking meetings with some of the team members. I didn't get to everybody, but I think, like most people, just craved human contact. And again, having been here for less than a year, it was just a really difficult time to be leading and making decisions and helping other people make decisions when I didn't have the depth of relationship and, dare I say, even credibility in the community just because of my lack of time here. So with team members anyway, those walking, talking meetings, safe distance, walking through neighborhoods or Aspen Grove Cemetery, ended up being very helpful in many ways.
You had meetings at a cemetery?
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's a conversation for another day, but it's a great walking opportunity. So that was personally, and that continued throughout all of 2020 and actually well into 2021. Even after we, the staff, came back into the office, into our individual offices, we did not open up for in-person board meetings and committee meetings until June of 2021.
Wow.
And so with, this time that you and I are visiting here in late March, it had been, it's still been less than a year that we've been, quote unquote, back to normal.
Right.
So it's just been this year, since January of this year, that I've really been loading up my calendar with meetings one-on-one with community leaders and getting back into touring and visiting with businesses. So all of that is going on.
When during the pandemic, who were you hearing from? I mean, obviously there was a shutdown. Businesses were being affected. So what type of feedback were you getting? What type of contact were you getting from businesses and from the community on what was happening and what could be done perhaps to keep them afloat?
So the hard pivot that happened within the office as a partnership team is that all of our usual business came to an abrupt halt. And our focus very much became on to your question, what is happening? How are people affected? So we actually took the entire Chamber of Commerce membership list and divvied it up. And then thinking about our downtown partner Main Street group, regardless of chamber membership status, but just kind of the whole downtown group, we divvied that up and just started making personal phone calls. And we called everybody. So all dozen staff members up here had a list, and we just started reaching out to say, how are you? How are you doing? What's happening? Is there something that we can do to help? And so the first thing that we heard actually were how much people appreciated that somebody was just touching base.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, because we're all going through something that was unprecedented and no one quite knew what to do with it. And so just to have that safe place and feel, the business people kind of felt like, okay, somebody's checking on me. Initially, what we heard was nobody quite knew how long is this going to last, what's going to be the implications, the repercussions. It was all just lots of, I'm okay right now, but I don't know in a few weeks or a few months, right?
Yeah.
So that was the initial. Second to that, Stephen, was people were just hungry for information, factual information from reliable sources. And that was probably the biggest role that we played in the initial 6 months, was being that trusted place of information and organizing trusted sources, just connecting all of those things.
You didn't obviously have to deal with the pandemic in your previous role, but I would imagine that when a crisis situation like this happened, you could probably look back as to your experience and maybe draw from something there to go, aha, I can adapt and draw from something here and use it here to help get us through this situation. Maybe it was leadership style, maybe it was experiential. Does anything like that come to mind that helped to get you through this?
Well, I've been doing this for a long time. I almost don't want to date myself, but people may find this very amusing now, but I actually remember the Y2K crisis and panic and all the meetings. Now, that one we had a lot of time to think about and worry about and prepare for. So I think about that as kind of a memorable moment in my career and thinking about managing through a crisis.
Yeah.
The other in my former most recent position prior to coming to Greater Burlington, we actually had a catastrophic failure of our bridge that connected to Wisconsin. So where you and I are sitting, we can look outside the window and see the fantastic bridge that goes over there to Illinois. Imagine if, with no warning, all of a sudden the bridge is closed and people can't get across.
Oh, wow.
So that was very catastrophic and pivot right now moment.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the Great Recession of 07, 08, and how that impacted employers and businesses. And so, yeah, those were kind of the three things that I can look back on and say some of the lessons learned from those experiences most certainly helped me, anyway, navigate this most recent one.
Yeah. Now that we, God be willing, are past this pandemic, we're sort of moving out. You've been going out in the community and you're reconnecting and reestablishing relationships. Are you hearing anything from the businesses that served as a benefit? That, hey, had it not been for the pandemic, we wouldn't have done this. We wouldn't have tried this. And it actually is now working in our advantage. We're actually in a better place now.
Sure. Well, successful businesses and successful leaders innovate, change, lean in. The folks that got through the last 2 years with the greatest success are those folks that just approach these things head on. And so absolutely, there are small businesses on the retail and hospitality side that learned how to use social media in big, bold, new ways and open up all new lines of customer communication and customer service. The idea of being able to sell via a Facebook virtual tour of a business and allow people to call to place an order and run it out curbside service. That happened a lot, of course, in the restaurant and beverage world, but it also happened on small retail side. So, well, and
Interesting.
even large resale. I mean, look at what happened at our major grocery stores and even, a big box like Walmart, that online shopping and
Yeah.
curbside service. And even though, from a shopping standpoint, all restrictions are gone, pandemic is over, many people discovered a convenience factor in that. Several weeks ago, unfortunately, I was sick with influenza. And so I was home and I used the Hy-Vee online order, and then my husband went and picked it all up. And so there's a convenience there, and businesses learned how to do that. Lastly, and just as notable, in certain industry sectors, employers learned that their staff can work from home
Yeah.
and still absolutely deliver top quality outcomes.
Yeah.
And so for many employers, they had to create innovative new policies. And to remain competitive in this tight labor market, some are still using work from home options as a way to attract or retain top talent. None of that would have happened without what we just walked through.
Well, and I know that a new dynamic also had to deal with just health in general, because we've been around long enough with jobs that obviously previously, if you weren't feeling well, you still were told to come to work unless it was really bad. Now, because of COVID, that mindset has sort of changed, because if you've got the sniffles and you kind of feel like you're coming on with something, it's like, no, you stay home.
Exactly.
Take your laptop home and work from home. That's something that probably was not even thought and considered a couple of years ago.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
So a whole new mindset. Well, thankfully we're moving out of that. People are getting out, they're shopping, they're getting out in public. The partnerships events are taking place again, and it seems like everyone is excited to get back to fellowshipping with each other.
Yeah, exactly that. And even in the midst of the bigger pandemic fears and anxieties, all totally understandable, we tried to deliver as much normal as we could. And so things that could be outdoors, we did. Last year, we had our Small Business Awards celebration. We moved forward with that, but we took it out of a hotel banquet room style and put it out at the Burlington Bees baseball stadium, right, a community field.
Yeah.
And people loved it, and they still came out. Farmers market still happened throughout the pandemic, and people appreciated that. But now that other partnership events and more traditional business settings are coming back, you're absolutely right. The attendance is as strong as ever. In some cases, we're breaking attendance records. People realize what they've lost, and they are very much joyful about the opportunity to get back together, and we're happy to provide them those opportunities.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, let's get down to a little bit of nitty-gritty. You have an opportunity to meet with city officials. You have an opportunity to go to conferences and talk to other state and local officials. What is the pulse in Iowa today in terms of challenges that are in existence right now that need to be addressed?
So some of my observations not only are based on those kind of conversations with other leaders, but also observances as being, I still consider myself a relative newcomer to the state. Only 2.5 years here, and it's been an odd 2.5 years at that. So one of the number one issues facing the state of Iowa and Greater Burlington area is that of workforce. And tied to that workforce conversation is a bigger conversation about population growth. So population growth in the state of Iowa has been flat to declining for many, many decades, even as some of our surrounding states, not all, but some of our surrounding states have actually seen population increases. Iowa has to figure this out. Those trends have also been true for the Greater Burlington area. So if the state and if Greater Burlington is going to remain competitive and viable decades from now, this is something that must be addressed. The governor is taking some pretty monumental steps toward that. Most recently, the announcements regarding the changes to income tax, and that's going to be huge over the next few years to make Iowa a more competitive and attractive state for people to live, build their careers, and/or locate their companies. There are other challenges tied to that, however, and that would include housing. Housing is a significant challenge, again, here in Greater Burlington. And when I say it's a challenge, availability, affordability, lack of options within the inventory is just really tight.
Right.
And of course, in that tight market, then you risk inflated prices, you risk a housing bubble, right? You want to be very careful that you aren't purchasing a home tens of thousands of dollars above its actual value,
Right.
because that could really come back to haunt you in 3 or 4 or 5 years. So that housing piece is another part of the workforce and population challenges, and those are all big. Locally, of course, in the city of Burlington, to a lesser extent in West Burlington, but also there are some infrastructure needs. Some of them are roads and bridges, water, sewer, expansion of trails, encouraging more development, both commercial and residential. So lots of opportunities, but definitely some challenges.
Well, and you see some of it being addressed. You see some of it happening, especially like in the downtown area, where you see a lot of these mixed-use buildings being put to use and having residential housing to try to attract folks. But you make a good point with housing. There seems to be an ongoing discussion about the term affordable housing, and that what might be affordable to one region may not be affordable in another region. So I don't know if we're having to change the definition or if it's just being more sensitive, right, to what is the right price range, I guess. And therefore, with that, what population are you drawing to come to the area? There's those challenges.
It is not just about the conversation about affordability, it's also what are different generations and/or stages of life looking for. So what is the inventory mix of executive level homes, for example? If our hospital or other major employer is seeking to attract a top level executive person, and they're expecting to find $400,000, $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 homes, and there's 2 for them to choose from, that to some may sound like, what kind of problem is that? But it is from a standpoint of trying to attract top talent. But how do you expect a developer to speculate and build 8, 10, or 12 $500,000 homes, right? That seems pretty risky. So there's that challenge. You don't have quite that same challenge in much larger markets where there's less risk in building those more executive level homes. You have a senior or empty nest. What are they looking for? The young professional with or without children. Some want to rent. Some are very interested in the downtown lifestyle. Other folks are still looking for that, picket fence, a 2-car garage that's attached. In the city of Burlington, one of the great challenges is a very old housing market. The average age of the homes in the city of Burlington is quite old. And so not everybody wants to live in a, quote, old house, even if it's been refurbished.
Yeah.
In West Burlington, there's a different challenge, and that is just overall housing stock and wanting to spur a lot more new development overall. So, yeah, the housing conversation is broad, and it's going to one that's going to take years to resolve. There isn't a silver bullet, and we're not going to fix it in 12 months.
And I wonder if there's anything specifically that seems to be lacking here, because again, we talk about Burlington, we talk about West Burlington, and the tremendous growth in West Burlington when you've got the hospital there and all of the other major commercial properties that are there. You've got the Recplex and you've got the turf and all of that. So there's tremendous growth in that area. Then, of course, you've got the collar communities that are outside. So truly, when you're saying Greater Burlington area, there does appear to be a lot of opportunity. Mm-hmm. There does appear to be a lot here. So I don't know necessarily, is there a focus on anything in particular, or is it just trying to keep going what's going?
So we actually are entering into a contract with a consulting company to do an updated housing study for all of Des Moines County. So that will include not only Burlington and West Burlington, but Mediapolis and Danville and Middletown. So that study should be available by late summer, early fall, August, September, and that will help crystallize where are the biggest opportunities. And we hope to accomplish a few things with that study. One is to aid developers when they are pursuing Iowa Economic Development Authority housing incentives and grants, when you can cite or reference a new or current housing study that helps strengthen those applications. Secondly, to encourage developers to feel more confident about making those kind of investments because they can see where the need is and where the potential sales. And third, we want to look for opportunities to engage the cities, the municipalities, in rethinking everything, maybe from zoning codes to their own incentives to try to spur and solve housing. So that housing study will be very, very instrumental, and maybe I'll come back and talk to you in 5 or 6 months and share with you what the results of that are.
In the remaining moments that we have left, your title as president and CEO of the partnership, is there such a thing as a typical day in the life of Della Schmidt doing your role as president and CEO, or is it every day is different?
Yeah, absolutely not. There's no such thing as a typical day. I'm an empty nester now, but back when the kids were at home, if you had asked them, hey, what does your mom do? Their standard answer was she goes to a lot of meetings. So if there's a typical day, I guess it involves a lot of meetings. What I enjoy the most about what I do is really two things. One, I know without a shadow of a doubt that every single day that I come to work, I have the opportunity to come alongside either an individual and resolve or help them with a need or an issue or a concern and make their day better. Or some of the decisions and things that I get to work on, like housing and workforce and school programming, may change and impact the lives of people I will never meet. And I take that very seriously, but it's also, it just brings a lot of meaning and purpose to my day. Secondly, what I enjoy about what I do is the fact that I get to meet and work with so many different people and personalities from so many different walks of life, and I get to go behind the scenes and see and experience cool things that I would otherwise not be able to. I've worked with numerous governors and met numerous governors from both the state of Minnesota and now Iowa, and state leaders and political thinking from all different angles. That's pretty exciting. I've gone down in the U.S. gypsum mine over here west of the city, and that was exciting and slightly terrifying at the same time. I've toured Case New Holland, and I've toured Silgan Containers, and to see the innovation and the creativity and the thought process that goes from taking something from a raw product to a raw material to an end product. I mean, that's all very exciting and makes my days very, very interesting.
Yeah.
And the unpredictability of it. I think I know when I look at my calendar and my to-do list what I'm going to do, but I never know. One phone call and one email or somebody walking in could be entirely different.
Right. Well, you never know what tomorrow may bring, but we're glad to have you as president and CEO to be heading up the Greater Burlington Partnership at this time. And thank you, Della, for coming in and sharing with us today.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much for listening to All Things Greater Burlington, and we will see you next time.
You have been listening to All Things Greater Burlington with Stephen Brody. Be sure to hit the subscribe button to catch all new episodes. To learn more about All Things Greater Burlington, visit greaterburlington.com/ATGB.